Check. 1, 2, yep, think we're okay. Popping in for our usual Friday chat. I'm a little bit later than usual. I had some things to organise this morning with shoots and stuff. I've got a wedding I've got to do tomorrow. So I wanted to organise that before we actually started. Actually, let me just change glasses too. Okay, so let's see who's in on the chat. I'm just going to put hi everyone. Let's just put this down as pre-show, guys, and we'll leave it for a few minutes, and then we can get started. I've got a few things I want to discuss with you today, obviously, and then we'll give it up to a open Q&A as well as we go on. So, Robert's just saying, hi, I've been looking to get a smallish street camera. This has caught my attention indeed. You're talking about the Zeiss one? Going to talk about that. It's a really strange design, though. I'm actually going to have a talk about it. Trevor's here. Manuel's also here. Who else have we got? Robert's obviously here. Casper's here as well. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes, guys, to wait for people to log in, and then we'll get started on the show. So I will put a timeline down below. So if you obviously don't want to watch this, you can just skip ahead or check that timeline. And then obviously we'll start the show from there. So I want to give it, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes to let it go. I've just posted a video this morning talking about the Fuji. I had some interesting comments on there. I was in no way talking about the USA though, guys, because I don't know what the stock's like where you are, but it's just been from down here. I noticed that the XT3 was basically in stock everywhere down here that I had a look at yesterday. So that was an interesting thought as compared to, say, something like the a7 III, which you still can't get. I actually said the a7S III in there. It must be stuck in my head, that camera, after reading a couple of things this morning. I think it had just stuck in my head, and that just came out of my head. Mark's here as well. Melvin's also here. Roderick's here as well. So we're getting a few now popping in, guys. It's still not cracker stubby for me weather yet. Hopefully it will be soon, that's for sure. We had a beautiful day yesterday. I actually shot a dancer yesterday through the streets of Melbourne. I was going to photograph Kiara in the afternoon, but I got there early in the morning and she was still in bed. I phoned her and I woke her up. So I had to basically leave because I had this other shoot, a paying shoot that was scheduled earlier than that. So I've delayed Kiara's shoot till next week. But I will probably post a dancing one that I've done, the video of it, tomorrow morning for you all to have a look at. So you'll be able to see that tomorrow. Barry's here as well. I think that's J-Bo Audio, I think is this. Hey, from Alaska. A7 III still recommended for video. Yes, it certainly is. It's amazing. If you want a great video camera, there's nothing wrong with using that one at all. If I didn't want 4K 60p, I would just get another A7 III. But I really do want 4K 60p, so that's why I'm waiting to see what happens in that regard. But we'll talk about the Sony release shortly. Steve's here as well. Ray's here. DL's also here from Arizona. Mark's saying, Matt just showed 3 new lenses from Voigtlander for E-mount. Interesting. The lenses are manual focus. They always will be if they're Voigtlander though, Mark, but they are beautiful to use. Gregory's saying hi from Florida. Robert's also saying, I don't know, Photokina really shaking up the industry. So much going on. It is. There's heaps going. Photomix also in here. G'day, mate. How you going? Got some interesting things to discuss today. Can't wait. How's my exposure? Do I look amazing? Oh, I love it. From Waco, Texas. Snow's here as well. Coke. Rick's saying it's finals time, crack. Cam with me. I know, it's a AFL Grand Final tomorrow. Unfortunately, I've got a... Well, not unfortunately, I shouldn't say. I'm looking forward to it. But I do have a wedding to do tomorrow, so I'm not going to be able to watch the Grand Final here. That's our biggest sporting day here. Well, I mean, I need the money and I need to work. Hello, anyone rumours on the RX10V? What's rumours? The next model? No, I haven't heard about that at all, actually. Hi, David. Could you tilt your camera down a little too much headroom, lower third covering you? Yeah, let me see if I can. Or should I sit up? Hang on. Let me see if I can bring this up a bit. Is that better? I should see if I can move it. Which way does it need to go? It needs to go that way. How's that? Nothing wrong with a bit of headroom. Peter said, hey all, what else have we got? Torben said, man, I've got to get to bed. It's 5:34 a.m. here, and I have to get up at 8. Oh, my God. No sleep at all. That's not good. Do you process your own wedding photos? Yes, I do, Trevor. My work to me is art, and I don't want anyone else to process them because that's my work. There's no way I'm going to let someone else start editing because then I'm not really a believer in it. I really do believe that you should have your own style and processing, and that comes from actually processing the images. I adore doing the editing, and that's part of my artistic side, and there's no way I'm going to let that go. And I really believe that you really probably should do your own editing if you are offsetting your... And I know a lot of photographers do even use people overseas and stuff, but the quality of my work to me means everything, and I will back off doing weddings if I can't handle the amount of weddings I'm doing, rather than taking that many and then outsourcing them. Then basically I don't want to be like a production line, so my work is really going to be based on what I can produce myself. That's the artistic side for me. It's almost to me like if you had an artist and you asked them to do a piece of work for you and then they just gave it to someone else and they did that piece of work. I don't think it's right, but you may disagree with me on that, but I don't really think it's right. It's okay if they're doing initial editing, but definitely the higher-ended retouching and editing and things like that, I want to be doing myself. But I do all my own editing. I don't give my editing to anyone. So, yeah, that's basically what I'm doing there now. All right, guys, I think we're going to get started. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring the A7siii images sign up, and then I'll just introduce everything again, and then we'll start for the day. So bear with me just for a second. G'day everyone for our usual Friday live show. It is a little bit later today. I've had to do some things concerning the wedding we're doing tomorrow morning. So I've had to do that this morning, so I'm a little bit later than what I am usually, but obviously if you can't get the live show, you can catch it after this is finished at your own leisure. So we're going to talk about a number of things, so it's going to be interesting. I'm going to talk about a few rumours with the A7S and some Zeiss rumours, things like that, or releases. So we're going to go through a stack of stuff. Also, we will go through the Q&A. So if you can, let me just move this over so I can see this fully. If you can, just make sure that you put @David Osler. Now I'm going to try and do a little bit differently like that one camera guy and that do. I'm going to try and look at questions as we go on a little bit and then open it up to questions a little bit later on. That way it's sort of more relative to what I'm talking about at the time. So I might try it a little bit differently now. So fire away your questions related to the stories that I'm actually discussing, and then I'll come back every so often and do that. And I will open it up to a live Q&A at the end though, so you can then ask anything you'd like. So, you know, we can go on from sort of that aspect. If you do want my full attention, just make sure that you do have @David Osler. I don't know if anyone's done that yet. No, they haven't. If you put @David Osler, it will bring it to my attention, and that's an important thing because sometimes I'll miss it, or if it gets down to the rush near the end, we'll be skipping things and basically just going to those ones that have hashtagged it. So just make sure that you do that. Let me start with just a couple of questions first, just to see if we can answer some things before actually starting. I had one question here talking about the A7 III still recommended for video, and I did say in the pre-show that yes, I do still believe that's an amazing video for camera for video. In effect, I actually shot a full video of it yesterday of a dancer that I'm still putting together that hopefully I'll finish today and I can post tomorrow morning for you. It's amazing, and it's incredible for doing video, and I used the 55mm and the Tamron yesterday on that, and it worked beautifully. So the only reason really why you'd have to upgrade is I'm waiting for the 4K 60p, which obviously I think the A7S III is going to have. We're going to talk about that shortly, but I'm hoping that's what it has. Apart from that, really, there's nothing really much else you could want, apart from if they pulled out, you know, this amazing thing of putting internal NDs and stuff like that in the A7S. But we will talk a little bit about that later. So if you did need a video camera now, yes, I could fully recommend an A7 III. Let me just see if there's other. Matt's apparently just showed 3 new lenses from Voigtlanders. Voigtlanders are amazing if you like doing manual focus. They're beautiful. They have hard stops on the lenses. It's gorgeous to focus. But you've just got to be aware that you're not going to have that with AF mount lenses. Robert said, Photokina is really shaking up the photography industry. So much going on. I'm really excited. I know it's incredible. There is some great stuff actually going on at the moment. Rick said it's finals times. It's our AFL Grand Final. That's Australian footy tomorrow. Like I said, I'm working though. I'm not going to be able to watch it. Photomix in here. What else have we got? Just seeing if there's any other questions before we actually start. Photomix said, just put my name down at the local store to pre-order the Z6 with the FTZ adapter. Yeah, I noticed Nikon Australia have got a open show about that next month. I may go to, I'm not sure if I'm going to have the time, but I might just go and have a look. Mike's just saying hi. Oops. Where are we? What's the ETA on the Z6? Photomix said it doesn't release until November the 30th, so plenty of time. Oh, yeah, there you go. Subs. So if you put the @David Osler, it'll come up like that I can actually see it. Nikon showed off their new 500 f.4 lens. My question is, should there be f-stop sacrifice over size and weight for travelling? Well, probably not, but remember, most of the people that are using these massive lenses are wildlife people or sports, and they often need the fast aperture. So I suppose what you're saying there is, should they have not released a 5.4, should it have been a 2.8? I suppose they're covered with other lenses that they have at 2.8, so that one probably is designed for travel at the 5.4. Is it a constant 5.4 though? Luke said, when do you think the A7S III will come out? I'm going to discuss that soon, Luke. Daniel said, my God, the A7 III not been around a year yet. I know, it seems like it's been out for ages, doesn't it? Same as my A9. DL said, thank you sincerely for your viewpoints. I am now an A7 III shooter after selling my entire Nikon kit due to you. And you're never going to look back. I've never looked back either, DL. That camera is incredible. It really is incredible. Daniel said, what, David? Thanks to you, I bought the 2875. I love it. I know. How good is that lens? I used that lens yesterday doing a video with the 55, and it is outstanding. I also did all of the shooting with it yesterday as well. So stay tuned for that one. Rui said, you have 2 teams in the grand final. Yep. We've got Collingwood and West Coast Eagles, which is a team from West Australia, playing tomorrow. My team's the Western Bulldogs. Wayne said, Canon holds the patent on the side articulating display. Yeah, I know. I keep hearing that, but is that true? The reason why I asked this, Wayne, actually, I'm going to talk about that shortly. The reason why I asked this, Wayne, is that the new announcement of the Profoto takeoff of the A1, that was Godox, wasn't it? Let me just see if I can bring that up. Because I haven't put that down on the screen, but I did want to talk about it. Let me see if I can find it. I've got to see where it actually was mentioned. Actually, it's on my photography, videography side, I think. Because it's a direct takeoff of the A1. Does anyone know what it was called? Oh, here we go. I think it's there. No, that's not it. I'm just trying to see if I can find this flash. Let me just go to the photography and videography school on Facebook, because it might actually be in there, because I know Gerald posted something about it. Because I'd love to talk to you about it, how close it was to the A1. Let me just see if I can find it, and then we'll have a discussion. Please join this group too, guys. If you're searching, it's the Photography Videography School. Please join us on there. Let me just see if I can actually find it, because I know Gerald posted something about it the other day, and I wanted to have a discussion about it. Here we go. It's this. I think this is going to open up YouTube. Yeah, it probably is. Let me just see if I can stop it and see if it'll actually get it, a picture of it. I wanted to turn it around so you can actually see it. At the moment, it looks like it's got the Godox normal bottom on the actual flash itself. There you go. You could sort of just see it then. Let me see if I can stop it on a point. All right. So basically, it's got the exact same build layout as what the Profoto A1 has. And it even had the same, looking at that thing that I found earlier, it even has the same pop-on diffuser and color gels and everything else. So this is a really interesting point, and I wanted to bring this up because I know a lot of people out there start to bag Profoto, but one of the interesting things here is, and this is what I said when I saw that, and I can understand why a lot of people don't want to buy the Profoto because it is incredibly expensive, and the A1 I think is something like $1,400 Australian. It's nuts, really. But in a way, you should be thanking Profoto because Godox have done a direct copy of that. They've basically re-engineered this and done a direct copy of it. So if Profoto had never announced that at all or designed it, this never would have come about. And this is what I want you to think about. When you bag companies like Profoto, you're bagging companies that do the initial research on all of this stuff that later on is re-engineered by these Chinese manufacturers that basically knock this off. Now, before everyone starts going crook at me and going, but it's all about dollars, have a think about this. How would you feel if someone took your work and did a direct copy of it? I mean, a direct copy of it, and then sold it. Now, this is what I'm trying to say to you. So everyone is, it's fantastic that Godox are doing this, but somewhere along the line, they've just ripped off this design, completely copied it. Now that's up to them, I suppose, whether they want to do that. And you know what, I'd probably even buy one. But what I'm saying is you need to think about this when you start bagging companies like Profoto and these dear-ended manufacturers that spend all of this money on the development of this stuff, and then someone like these Chinese companies just knock it off and just take it straight away. And you've got to think about how would you feel if that was your work and it would be completely copied, or how would a musician feel if they released a song and then someone copied that word for word and note for note and then they made money on it. It's exactly the same thing. So I want you to think about that. So next time you start thinking you're going to bag Profoto, you should actually be thanking Profoto for designing that flash in the beginning, and then basically having a Chinese company knock that off and release the exact same flash at a third of the price. So think about that when you're bagging them next time. And I just thought I'd bring that up, and it'll be interesting to see if you can get my point on it, or if you just think I'm being silly. But think about the musician and think about the photography of someone copying the work exactly, and then you might get exactly what I'm trying to say. Let me just come back to... Let me just close that for a minute. Let me just come back to questions before we move on to the first stories of the day. Where were we? I'm just coming back through these before we actually start. So that's why I'm saying, does Canon hold the patent for that? And this is why I'm asking about the articulating screen, because if that's the case, if Canon holds the patent for that, and someone can just copy the Profoto light that easily, surely they can edit that patent enough that they could still produce it. So I'm not certain that saying Canon holds a patent for that stands its ground. I think there'd be a way of getting around that. But, you know, let's have a think about that in the comments, because I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Mike said, give David Osa some likes. Thank you so much, Mike. I really would appreciate that too. Dante said, yeah, Godox killing it. Yeah, and they are, Robert. I agree with you. I just wanted to let you have a think about what I just said, though, about these companies that do the initial design and then having others knock it off completely. Nobody will buy the A7S III only for 4K 60. I'm telling you, they would, Sagan. There would be a hell of a lot of people out there that would buy that for the 4K 60. Godox with magnetic attachments. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yeah, Profoto really putting out great products. That's Photomix said. Mark said the Godox is using the V862 body and simply changed the head. But they said they were going to change that body, Mark. So that's the thing. If you look at the design, the round design, they've knocked it off. If you look at the magnetic attachments, they've knocked it off. You can't tell me that hasn't been copied from the A1. Delta Day said, Profoto has customer service, Godox none. Well, yeah, I've heard that's true. I agree, you are right, it's the same thing, Gregory said. Robert said it's a combination of Profoto and Magmod. Fathom Rocker said, David, I love Profoto, just wish I could afford them. And how are you doing, mate? Great, mate. All right, so let's go on to the first story anyway. So let's go on to this, because I noticed Zeiss released this new camera, and I want to know what you guys think about this. Let me just drag this down just a touch. It's a full-frame camera. Now, I'm not convinced about the design of this, though. I really think it's terrible. I hate the look of this camera. I don't know whether you guys like the look of this camera. And at the end of the day, the design really doesn't matter if it takes fantastic photos, as long as you're happy with using that camera itself. But does the design appeal to you? There's some other things too which are interesting about this. It's a fixed frame, it's a fixed lens, which is 35 f2, which would be lovely for 35mm full frame. It'd be nice if it was a 1.8 though. Oh, excuse me, I've got a coke burp. It says no distortion in RAW. It's got a 4.3-inch touchscreen, aluminium body. Now, this is the part that is fantastic, and I hope this is taken up by others out there. It's got a 512GB internal SSD. How good is that? But does that mean that there's no card slots in this? Now, that would worry me because it's another potential where it could crash if there's no SD card slots to back up. The other incredible thing is it comes with Adobe Lightroom CC integrated into the camera. Now, how on earth have they done that? That's pretty cool as well. So that's really interesting as well. It says has direct upload of images to the internet. Now, I know some people are going to say it doesn't matter if there's no no other backup card there because it can upload it directly. But I know, like anything, you can lose Wi-Fi. The wedding place I'm shooting at tomorrow, there's no internet access there at all. It's for some reason. It's a black spot and you just have got no internet access. So I don't believe that bit about uploading your images on the go is a solution because there are areas where you just can't do that. It's also saying that it ships in early 2019, no price yet. But so the interesting thing with this is the internal SSD. I think this is probably the future of the way cameras are going to go, and then you don't have to worry about memory cards not being fast enough, running out of memory cards, all these sort of things. That's fantastic. I really do like that idea. Having the internal Lightroom CC is pretty cool too. I'm not sure how usable it's going to be on a size of that screen though, but it's still interesting and I'd still like to have a look at it. Looking at the camera itself, let me know what you think about the design. I just don't like it, but that's me. I like more sort of more chunkier type designs. Like I even like the A7 S series and the A7 III. I quite like that design. I love the Fuji design though, but I do like that. Oops, that's Siri. I hate the way it does that. But let me know what you think about this. Do you like that design? Does it interest you? I'm going to come back to the chat now because I want to know if anyone's saying anything about it before we go any further. Let me come back because it's really interesting. I'm not sure about whether it's, do you think it's needed? Is it a needed camera when you can already get other cameras out there like the Sony cameras and stuff like that? Do you really think it's needed? Dwayne said 25 Batis or 24 1.4, which would you choose? I'd probably get the... Look, I haven't used the 24 1.4, obviously, but I think out of those two lenses, I'd get the 24 1.4 if I was buying anything at the moment, Dwayne. Did Canon get a patent on fully articulating screen? Panasonic and Nikon have been putting it on their cameras. Yes, but there was rumours. I read that the problem was that Canon just won't allow it on full-frame cameras. They may not be enforcing that patent on things like Micro Four Thirds and stuff like that, but it's interesting. But surely they can get around it by having an articulating screen that can pull out and even push up. At least you could see it back. It's not articulating, but fold up like, you know, your RX 100s. But it's interesting, and this is why I mentioned about that Profoto knockoff light by Godox. If they can get around it, I can't understand why other companies can't. And it's interesting. I'm not saying it's right. I'm buying the Profoto B10, Joe. I used it yesterday again. That is unbelievable, that light. It is incredible. It's the best. That Profoto B10 is the best light I've ever used in my life. I used it yesterday in the dance shoot. I didn't want to use flash at the time because she was moving very, very, very fast, and I would have had to just keep flashing and putting the strobe off continuously all the time. So I just used the continuous light. I was in the alleyway, and it worked beautifully. It really was great, and fantastic. I matched the ambient light that was coming in there. It was great. The Zeiss is a sexy camera. Well, there you go. See, design is a personal thing, James. I don't like it. I hate it, to be honest. But design is a personal choice. Leica grip looks painful. Yeah, I don't think the grip looks good at all. That's one of the things that I looked at when we were, that very sort of round, smooth thing. It looks like to me like there's nothing really to hold on to it. But like I said, it's all personal, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because it really is a personal choice that you want to make. Robert said, should have Capture One mobile. I bought Capture One the other day. I haven't used it yet, but I did buy it before the Sony price changed. Boy, did it go up after that, I noticed. It went up over double, I think, the price. So I'm glad I bought it when I did. And Sony Alpha Room has also had a 10% off as well, which I used it for. So I got that really cheap. Eventually, I'm going to use Capture One, but I think I'll only use it for tethering. Because I'd like to start doing some shoots with you guys tethering in the studio and showing you some live shoots and things like that. Which I may do in the future, so that's why I wanted to get Capture One. No card slots, so that's an issue, yeah. So it as someone just said then that SDs fail too, and they do, Carl, and that's why I'm saying it would have been good if they had an SD card slot as a backup. Peter said, I don't know why Zeiss made the thing. It doesn't take any media cards, and I think the way to get data off it is wireless transfer. Yeah, see, there's things that we still have to find out, Peter, yet about that camera. Fixed lens on that Zeiss, yes it is, I believe. Trevor said, Leica has fully embraced their industrial boxy design aesthetic. People say they feel great in the hand. Well, there you go. Lightroom and Android, yeah. There is a full version of Lightroom on it. I think that's the most amazing part of this camera. I think wouldn't it be it'll probably be the mobile version of Lightroom, I would think. I don't think it would be the full desktop version, surely. No card slots, yes, we were just going through that. It's Zeiss optics, so it's going to be gorgeous. Yeah, I'm sure it will. Kind of like where Zeiss is going with the software and internal storage. I kind of hope Sony brings back apps, though it would be great if they let other people develop applications for it. I know I hate the way they've taken the Play Memories apps off that camera. It's so annoying, off their new cameras. Palato said it's gorgeous. See, there you go. It's all personal. Peter said, has Sony released the data specs for the A7S? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Peter, no, they haven't. I'm just seeing if there's any other questions on this. Serious question, who wants the ZX1 and why? Well, that's why I'm seeing people here, if they can comment on it. Panasonic have articulated screen. Yes, but they haven't on their full frame, Linda. So that's the interesting thing about this. And this is why I'm saying, have Canon stop people using that articulating screen on full frame cameras. They may just allow it on micro four thirds, which I think they've got no competition against. Sub said it's not too keen on the Zeiss. I'm really looking at a hybrid. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I understand that. I find the design of the Zeiss camera unique, but it doesn't interest me. I think my only concern about having just internal storage on my camera is in case it fails and you might lose all of your images. Yeah, the other thing too is it's not only that, but if that drive fails, the camera becomes useless. And this is one thing about that design that I don't like. At least if you had an external SSD and then the camera could still perform if the SSD died inside, it would be good. But then you'd have to hope that they don't put all the operating systems on that drive. You'd hope it's still in memory somewhere like a conventional camera. So that's an interesting part to that. If it did fail, the camera becomes inoperable. Subvid said, yes, do live shoots. Yeah, that's why I want to start doing that for you all. Sagma said, it's an idea like Sigma. Better stick with making lenses. Better make cheap lenses too. Ergonomics on the new Zeiss is sweet. If you look at the back, it tilts towards the palm. Thought a natural close hand will hold it sweetly. That's we're talking about down here, how it sort of is designed through here. Yeah, I suppose your hand will fit nicely over that section, but I prefer it to be a bit more chunk. Well, I can't say, because look, I haven't held it, have I? So I shouldn't talk about I prefer that. I mean, I'd have to hold it first to say, is it any good? But I do like it when it's a little bit more rounded, like what the A7 series is, the new Panasonics and stuff like that. What else have we got before we move on to the next story? It's a sexier version of Sony's first fixed lens full frame from a few years ago. Sony a7S III delayed. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, Christmas. Robert said it's a street camera for creatives. Cool. All right. So I think that's all. I don't think we need to look at anything else. Let me just check if there's any specifications that we need to look at on this that I should talk about. Oh, yeah. So it's 4K 30p only. It's 4K 60p, sorry, it's 1080p 60, if you want to have that. I don't think there's anything much else that is just amazing. It's got a 1/8,000 seconds to a 30-second exposure. The lens is 8 elements, 5 groups, f2 to f22. That's about it, really. The LCD is 338 pixels per inch. That's about it. So there's nothing really else much to talk about apart from that. All right, so let's go on to the next story. Is this one that there's a new Zeiss Batis. Apparently they've announced that the Zeiss Batis 40mm f2 lens is announced. I'm not certain yet if they're mentioning about when this is going to be released. It's going to be priced at $1,299 US. So it's not cheap, but nothing in Zeiss is cheap. The same design as your Batis, so it's beautiful. You can sort of see the whole range through here. Looks like a really beautiful lens. I'm not sure what that is there. It doesn't. I can't see. If anyone knows what that is there, let me just see if I can Google another image, because there might be more images. Because I'd like to know what that is. I'm not sure what that thing is underneath. Oh, it might be a focus. I think it's a focus button that you'll actually press. Oh, yeah, there you go. It is, yeah. So you can actually change that to have your focus full, or if you're going close up. So it must have a fairly good macro or something built in there. So I don't know if it has, what does it say here? It says f2 minimum shooting distance 0.24mm. Yeah, so it'll have a reasonably good, almost a macro type look about it. That's to change the focus. So obviously when you're doing it that way, it'll not have so much trouble focusing. So that's interesting. Looks like it said minimum focusing distance is 5.7 inches. Looks like a very nicely designed lens. Let me just move this over so you can see it. It's typical Zeiss design. I know a few people that would love to have this. I mean, it's probably not one that I would buy. I mean, I prefer the 85 and 35 focal length. But I know some people, particularly Oreo, that always joins the chats, would love this. 67mm lens if you're putting filters on it. But again, it's got that beautiful Zeiss design, which I still adore. The feel of my 85 even now, it's just gorgeous. Their design for lenses is just stunning. Really beautiful to use. Great weather sealing. They haven't said it's weather sealed, but I'm sure it would be. The Batis is. That's one thing you pay extra for. So that's that lens anyway. They're saying that it's actually going to be, like I said, $1,300 US. So it's probably going to be $2,000 Australian. I'm just seeing if they mention anything else about it. Extremely short minimum focusing distance, and that's why they've added that focusing switch on there. So let me know if anyone interested in it. I'm going to open up the chat too about that, because let's see if anyone's saying anything about that lens. I'd be curious to know. What else have we got? I'm just going to go through some of these. We can get the Nikon D850 for all the price of all these new overpriced mirrorless. Yeah, I know, look, you can. The D850 is amazing. You still can't get that camera anywhere though. It really is amazing. Now, the thing that is unbelievable about that is I've used the camera and I've tested it. It's fantastic. And remember, I used to shoot a D810, so I know how the Nikons work in that regard. The D850 is a big step up even over that. The new Nikon, the high-ended model particularly, is even better in dynamic range than what the D850 is. So that's going to be an incredible camera for stills. Like I said, I'm not convinced for video, obviously, but for stills, it is going to be an amazing camera, looking at the early reviews of how that sensor performs. But the D850 is amazing, but I just don't want to go back to digital SLRs. I hate going back to that technology. Flash sync all the way up to 1/8000th. Oh, did it say that on that, did it? No, I think that's shutter speed, not flash sync, Joe. Yeah, it's a focus limiter. Yep, I've just checked that now. Peter said focus limiter, yep. It's a little bit different since it can limit it to 3 ranges. Yes, that's true. It just makes focusing very much quicker. Wayne said Canon licensed the articulating display on crop cameras. They refused to grant their license for the full frame cameras from competitors. Canon has multiple patents on articulating displays. Okay, well, that could answer it. But like I said, I don't understand how someone like Godox can copy the A1. I'm sure Profoto patented that A1. I'm sure they would have done that. And yet that can be blatantly copied. What's to stop camera manufacturers also doing the same thing with an articulating screen? This is a thing that I don't understand. Bill said, I wonder if some sort of sliding retractable screen could replace the tilty flippy screen. This is what I'm wondering about too. There must be some way that you can lift it out and then fold it up if you had to, or something like that. Batis is closing the Sony gap, waiting for the 105 Sony. Yep. Good on Zeiss though, changing up the storage formats. Yes, 131 magnification is nice. Yes, it is. It'll be a multi-purpose lens. That's what I love using the Tamron. Like I showed you last week, how much I could get in to do bridal prep and things like that, that I almost don't need to put a macro on for most of the work now. And that, it basically becomes an all-around lens. Having that ability to use the macro side of it too is fantastic. 40 is closer to true normal than full frame. Yeah, like I said, I probably would like it too because I love the 35mm focal length. But I just don't think I need it when I've already got the Sony 35 1.4. Robert said, let's face it, the full frame 35 sensor is now the new film. Anyone can now get great results with ISO 6400 to 25400. Yep. When you say great images though, it's still, you've got to be an artist to get beautiful images though, Robert. There's a difference between taking a shutter and then getting beautiful art. M. Palato said the Zeiss camera has a leaf shutter. So yes, wow, I didn't know it was leaf. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. If it's a leaf shutter, that's pretty amazing. I might have to have a look at it. Eric said, can the A7R 3 change exposure and shoot some more white while writing to the buffer? I don't know because I haven't got the A7R. Someone might be able to answer in there about that. I think you can keep shooting, but it slows down. That's the thing. It will slow right down. Linda said, do love the Batis 85 and waiting for the 40. I love my Batis too, Linda. I adore that lens. I mean, I probably wouldn't buy another one because I'd just get the Sony 85 if I bought another lens now. But I just adore that lens. It's just fantastic. I love the quality of it, the weather sealing. It's stabilized. Great lens. Really is beautiful. Robert said, now it comes down to lens quality, 4K ergonomics, eye autofocus is sweet, but not totally necessary. The selling point for cameras in the future will be niche markets. Interesting. Raising curiosity in urban street photography with lightweight kit versus studio fashion photography, nature and landscape. Linda said, do you think it would be a good wedding lens or is the 35 better? Well, it depends how you shoot. Linda, I prefer the 35. I think I would, but I haven't used the 40, so I can't say. It may be better than that. But I do love the 1.4. For me particularly, I love the 35 1.4. Doing all of the low-light wedding stuff inside reception halls and things like that, I just adore the look of that 35 1.4. So I wouldn't give that away for anything at all. Like I said, I've always considered getting the Canon 85 1.2 as well for portraits, and I still am thinking about getting that camera. Someone mentioned to me today, and Torben, I think it was, said that he wonders whether the Sigma adapter, they'll bring out a new version of that Sigma, the MC11, the same thing as Canon have done, with you can put the internal ND, the filter, actually straight through that. Now, that would be fantastic. That certainly would give me a reason to think about getting the Canon 85 1.2. So I can't answer that question. It depends on how you want to shoot and what aperture you want, Linda. I do adore the 35 1.4 though. So yeah, the 35 1.4 would be more important for me, I think. Erica said, 40mm sounds like a great focal length. Hope it's sharp like the 55 1.8 and not too much heavier. I meant the quality that the sensor will give out. Oh, okay. Peter said, I've had more SSD cards fail than SD cards. Yeah, that does worry me, I must admit. Mark said, you can keep shooting on the A7R. Yeah, it just slows down, doesn't it, Mark? That's what I thought. Robert said, I think the new niche will be low light photography, as it will be just as easy to take low light images as it would be in daylight. Mark said the A7R III also has a crop advantage over the A7 III. It has, yes, and that's true. I use the A7R II like that all the time. Soon to come with an RGBW sensor. Subvid said, are you tempted by the full frame panny? No, I'm not. Subvid's not at all, actually. It just doesn't interest me enough at this stage. Look, there's still got to be interesting things about that to come out, so you never know. I might change my mind once the full specs about that camera are announced. We're still waiting to see what they really release with that, but nothing really blew me away in that camera. I'm really waiting to see what Sony announced, which I think is the next story. I think after this one, I think. So yeah, we'll wait and see. But I think Panasonic, if they did have an articulating screen on that, I may have been much more interested than them not having it. But there's still so much unknown about that camera that we don't know yet what they're going to release with the panny. And that's the problem. All right, so let's go back to stories. The next one is this. Now, this was a bit upsetting when I saw it. And this is why in the video this morning that I posted, when I meant to say A7 III, I posted A7S III. It was still stuck in my head. If you watch the video, and I will post these links down below, but if you watch the video down below, I think 5D, or someone posted about it, it's not looking good that we're going to see that anytime soon. When you look at I think it was Cinema 5D or something, I can't remember, but I read a whole article about it this morning. But it's not looking like it's going to be released anytime soon. The thing was that when I think it was a Sony, one of the high execs in Sony was talking, one of the big managers was actually discussing it. He wouldn't really answer anything about it, but basically he said that we still had a wait to do before it was actually announced. Now, I wouldn't think they'd say that and then 2 or 3 weeks later or even 4 weeks release it. It doesn't make sense to me that they would do that. So now I'm not convinced that we're going to see this anytime soon. And that's a pity. And this is what I did discuss with you when I talked about all the cameras that have been released lately haven't really pushed Sony. And the same thing happened with the Panasonic. I really hoped that the new Panasonic would have pushed Sony to make an announcement with the A7S III, but it didn't. There's nothing out there, like I said, apart from the 10-bit, obviously, the 4K 60. There's nothing out there yet that has pushed it. We don't know how that Panasonic's going to focus. It's still just contrast detect. Now, they may have done some voodoo with that and it might come out really good. We don't know yet, but I haven't seen anything in there that gives me confidence that it would be any better than what I've been using when I had the GH5. So we still have to wait. Obviously, there's another 6 months before that's announced. But I think because they've announced that roughly in around 6 months before there's another announcement, again, it's not pushed Sony at all. And there's nothing out there in the full frame line that pushes Sony, because anything that Canon has released, anything that Nikon released, has been equal by the Sony a7R III and also the a7 III. And apart from the 4K 60p, there's nothing in those cameras at all that would make you want to dump Sony and move over to the Nikon or Canon or even the Panasonic. So I think that's the problem at the moment. So I'm starting to think that the only chance we've got of seeing a new camera this year is to see the A7000. That wasn't mentioned. And they do have to answer the Fuji, which I discussed actually this morning. But they do have to answer the Fuji X-T3. And that's the thing I think that's still got to be answered by Sony. Because if you look at the Fuji X-T3, the specifications for that camera, I do believe that clearly beats the A6500. I don't think there's any doubt amongst any photographer, apart from real Sony fanboys, that Fuji X-T3 beats the Sony A6500. So if you're dealing with that, then Sony have to answer that. And the only way that they can answer it is to release a new A7000 or something along that lines in the APS-C market. Now, we also know that they're going to announce lenses as well. So perhaps with those lenses that are going to be announced, they're also going to announce some great APS-C lenses to fit that new camera as well. We can only hope that they give APS-C some love as well if they do announce a new camera. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see the A7S III now, and I wouldn't be surprised now if we don't see that this year. I'm just not confident. I'm hoping like crazy that we do, because I really want to purchase that camera. I really do hope we see it, but I don't think we will. I think now, particularly with what Panasonic's just announced, that I think they may have gone a little bit back onto the drawing board, and they may change some things and alter a little bit, or you know, just change something about it, or even hold off and release something early next year when Panasonic have fully announced their camera. They've then got something to announce it too. Because the problem is, at the moment, there's no rush. And you could clearly see that when you looked at that discussion from that Sony executive. You could tell that there was no rush there at all for Sony to do anything. Let's open this up to the chat, because I'm curious to know what you guys think, and if you think I'm on the right track here. I'd love to, guys, if you give me a thumbs up too, please, because it just lets people know I'm online. So I really would appreciate that if you could do that for me. So no subs. I'm not tempted by the Panasonic at the moment, because we just don't know enough about that camera. It's not to say next year when they release some more details about it that it's not going to be great. Mpala2 said if the X-T3 had IBIS, it would be selling better. Yeah, and that's the problem. It really does miss IBIS, and that's one of the things that I thought about that. I don't know why they held back on that IBIS as well. Berger says, we need new processors, less expensive, faster, with much better efficiency. Processors become the bottleneck in the cameras. Yes, they do, and it also helps with heat as well. The better those processors are, the less heat is involved in the actual camera. Robert said, Sony will be bringing out new RGBW sensors. Yes, and you're probably right, they will. They have the white in that, which is the different part about those sensors. There's also Foveon sensors now coming back apparently as well. Epic Sky said 4K 120p would make people take dumps. Eat their dumps and dump bricks again. I love it. Photomix says Sony has created a culture where you guys expect a new camera every 6 to 9 months. And I think you're right, Ike. I think that's probably half of the problem. But at the moment, there's no real reason that Sony have to announce anything, is there? And that's the problem. They just haven't been pushed. And because the A7 III was such a fantastic release, they still haven't had to answer that camera because nothing has beaten it. That's the problem. If something had beaten it, like if Canon and Nikon had blown that camera out of the water, then we might have seen a new announcement, but they haven't. Sony really did an amazing thing with that A7 III. They really did. It will go in the A7S III. Interesting, Robert. Mpala2 says Sony is in the catbird seat. They will take their time and then come out swinging. Epic Sky said not equal with one SD card. Wayne said Profoto Tech is built on open source code. They can't sue. Canon can't sue. Interesting. But the thing is, you're saying it's built on open source code, but surely that's the software, not the hardware, Wayne. I'm sure they would have had a patent on the hardware. Peter said, if you notice, Sony rep in that interview never actually said the A7S. He kept calling it the S. Could be an A9S or with 6K. I think you're wishing, Peter. Epic Skies said they already shoot 6K and downsampled. True. M. Palato said there is a photo show. Oh, thank you, DL. Stubby for tomorrow night after the wedding. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. M. Palato said if there is a show in October, yes, I think something will be announced. But that could be the A7000, couldn't it? There's no reason why that might not be the A7000. I just don't think at the moment we're going to see an A7S III. I'm hoping, but I just don't think there is. The rumour sites have gone very quiet on that camera. Nothing's been mentioned about that camera, so it's not looking good. Photomix says, I don't think there's an issue of Sony being pushed. If Sony had something to say, they would say it, because that was never the case before. Sony wasn't pushed before the release of the A7 III. But perhaps they knew what was coming, Ike, with the Nikon and Canon releases. You just don't know. Erica says, I'm glad I don't really need an A7S III. Photomix said Sony could have released the A7 III at Photokina and they would have still won the show. True. The specs for that price can't be beaten. That's the problem. That camera is so good for the cost that it can't be beaten. And this is the problem that the other manufacturers are facing. They really did blow it out of the water when they released the A7 III. They really have. It's incredible. Sony Casper's going. The Sony block from Photokina didn't seem interested in the medium format or 8K res camera. Sony should think hard about this one. Full frame still has a lot to go though. Imagine if this happened and Sony brought raw video into the A7S III. Game over for everybody. Thank you so much for that donation, DL. Really appreciate it, and I will buy a stubby. I'm just laughing at this comment. The world's foremost... Can you guys see that? The world's foremost authority. Do you eat ass? Oh, God. Oh, honestly. Let me just see if I can block that person. People crack me up, honestly. They really do. It just makes me laugh, some people. Let's keep going down. Mark said, Erica Daniel has some good explanation here on YouTube about buffers, etc. Yeah, Daniel's great. Yeah, he's got some great YouTube pages. Venom said, my neighbour is literally in the process of selling his company in China because they are no intellectual property rights and his stuff keeps getting stolen. I know it really is awful if you think about it. I know, look, I was trying to say that about Profoto, but it happens about a lot of other things as well. And this is probably why some of these big manufacturers go broke, because they spend all of this money developing these things and then someone just rips it off and then does a direct copy, and then that program, that company basically goes broke. The problem is, if these bigger companies aren't developing this stuff, then you're never going to see this better stuff. So you do need to think about that. That's why I do try to buy the genuine article rather than knockoff stuff. And look, you might not agree with that, I know, because money is tight for everyone, and I do understand that side of it. If you're not earning reasonable money, then I can understand why you do try and take another option and save money, and I fully support that if that's what you have to do. The only thing you've got to consciously do, though, is think about it. If you can afford to get the original version of that, you're supporting the people that originally developed that technology, and you're supporting them in that regard as well. So it's just something to think about, if you can. I'm not saying you have to do it. Obviously, if you can't afford it, you should go down that way. But it's just something to think about. Where are we? Jason said, I don't think that Sony has the A7S III. I think the A7 III was meant to be the S, but they decided to change plans. Interesting. I think they'll have an S, but I just think it's been held back. Would love an amazing A7000. Robert said, my God, I have camera anxiety. Going to stick with my D3, D700 and F5. Nothing wrong with those cameras, Robert, at all. Langston's here. G'day, Langston. Erica said, Mark Frost, I will check him out. Many people tested buffer clear time, but very few explained exactly what could be done. The thing is, Erica, look, I've got those buffer issues with all the cameras that I've got. When I say they're issues, I've never come across a buffer issue. I don't shoot that many photos in one go to have it a problem. Like, who seriously is going to run and gun and be shooting off 20 images at a time? Now, you might, look, if you're into sports, yes, you might do that. But if you're a normal photographer doing weddings, if you're a normal photographer doing portraits, I shoot dance all the time. I did it yesterday. I never came across a buffer problem, and I was using the a7 III. And the buffer never, ever came up when I was shooting in high continuous. If you're spraying and gunning like that, you're going to have 20 million images on your card, and that's something that you have to consider. Unless you're shooting sports, the buffer's not an issue at all. Yuri said A7000 Mini A9. Well, that's what the rumours were saying, and that's what I hope it's going to be. It sort of has to be to compete with the Fuji X-T3, doesn't it? That does 20 frames per second now. It'll do 30 if you deal with a crop. But it will do 20 frames per second. Photomaniac said, David, eat the bee. I'm not sure what that means. You're talking about that comment. Dimitri said, what about what you said earlier about uploading your photos on the go? What if you could connect it to your phone like a hotspot? Yeah, but the problem is, I can't use my phone. Like tomorrow where I'm doing the wedding, I can't use the phone because there's no cell in that area. There's a black spot in that area and I can't connect. So having an upload is useless. It just doesn't work because you can never rely on having a cell signal in every place you go. That's the problem. Jason said, I'm just hoping that Sony doesn't reuse the R sensor for the 4. I wouldn't think so. I think that they'd probably produce a new sensor. Epic Sky said, considering X-T3 shoots 30 frames per second, I wonder if the A7 III will match it. I think they will. I don't know if they'll match 30, but they definitely will probably go for 20. I mean, I'm happy with the 20 of the A9. I really am. Yuri, X-T3 is 30 with focus. I don't think it is it? With focus. Oh, well, I'm not sure. Someone that knows about the X-T3 may be able to say. I know there's a crop involved, though, with that. Robert said, that's why I'm sticking with my Nikon. Nothing wrong with that at all, Robert. Wayne said, Sony can use the display in the A99 Mark II. In the A7S III, that's one way to get an articulating screen and putting it up. Yes, well, that's probably the way it would have to go. But you've got to try and get it over the EVF. That's the problem. But they do it in the Sony, don't they, the A99. Langston said, last night because I was trying to get photos of fire twirlers and their movement were unpredictable. Okay. Let me come down here. Erica said, I think the buffer clearing was much worse on the A7R. Yes, it was, Erica. I did get problems with that. I've never come across the buffer problem with the A7 III or the A9. I haven't got an A7R III, but people are just here saying it's not an issue. Look, unless you're spraying and praying, you're not going to have an issue unless you're shooting for sports. You're never going to come across that buffer issue. Let me just come down because I think I've got a donation. Thank you so much, Joe. The camera big guys are all in Japan. Same license laws. Godox Photo in China can steal from anybody they please and go unpunished, except by users. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, Joe. I wasn't trying to say to people that if you can't afford a Profoto, clearly you have to get something else because not everyone can afford Profoto, and I can understand that. But what I'm saying to you is that you shouldn't be bagging people that are using the Profoto system that can afford that side of it because they're helping you guys get better gear further down the line because China, these Chinese companies are just copying them like what you've just seen with the A1. They're doing a direct copy and you guys are getting it for cheaper. But I'm not saying to stop doing it, but please, I'm saying support the other people that are out there. Like you see these big companies going broke and you've got to be careful of that because if they go broke, we all lose out. But yes, the A7R II, which I've got, which is what I'm filming with here, I did come across the buffer issue with that. Jim said, the only thing I need is buffered is an aspirin. I don't know what that means. I love you guys, honestly. A7R III is much better, yeah. Linda said, Got one leg in Canon still and one in Sony. Should I sell my Canon 5D3 for a second A3, Sony a7 III? Debating myself. Look, Linda, if that was me, I would definitely get rid of your 5D3 and buy another a7 III. Yes, definitely. Particularly if eventually you want to start getting into video and doing all these other things and working that way. You can't go wrong. You just can't go wrong with the a7 III. Mark said, on the A7R3, the buffer is something like 570 frames in raw crop mode. Crazy. That's what I'm saying. You're never going to come against that buffer unless you're shooting sports. Thank you so much, Joe, for the donation. Really appreciate that. Manuel said, I'm sure there are 16 megapixel images in 30 frames per second. Is that the Fuji? M. Palato said, A7 could be an XT3 with IBIS. And see, this could be the thing that will kill it. And if it did have IBIS with similar specs, definitely it's going to kill it. Langston said, if you have a lot of Canon glass, maybe hold on to it. See what Canon releases in the future, Linda. Langston's just got a different opinion. I'd just sell it and use a Sigma adapter, but that's just me. I find having two systems is too hard. It really is easier to go full on if you're dealing with shooting constantly, because it's too hard to be changing to two different menus. That's what I did. I tried it with Panasonic for a while, and it just didn't work. Erica said, David, I believe you. Photostorm said, do you think the A7S III might pass 1 million mark in ISO sensitivity? You never know, it could. They could do probably anything almost with that Canon camera. Langston said, that's a really good point about development costs in new technology. And the point is, Langston, that people don't consider that aspect of it. And this is what annoys me sometimes. Like, they'll always bag people that can afford the high-ended stuff, but they don't realise that if no one was developing that stuff, no one will be getting the better stuff down later on that's copied. And this is why you should start thinking about that when you see Profoto being mentioned, don't bag Profoto for having that cost and for people having the money to purchase for that. You should be thankful that they're actually doing that, so that eventually someone is going to rip that off, and it's awful to say that, but someone is going to rip that off and you're going to be able to buy it if you can't afford that other Profoto Lite. And that's the thing. So you really should be trying to support the people that can use this high-end gear, because at the end, all this technology moves down. Langston said, I'm a dirty Godox user, so I feel slightly bad. I didn't mean it that way, Langston. I'm not having a go at you, because like I said to you all, that if that's what you can afford and you're happy with doing that, I don't blame you for doing it. All I'm trying to say to people is that you really shouldn't be bagging the higher end of gear, and it's just something that I want you to think about. Mike said, buffer issue will be less if your SD card has a larger write speed. True. Langston said, I was actually wondering how Profo would feel about the blatant knockoffs. Well, they can't be happy about it. When I first saw that, I thought, wow. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is where sometimes I can be a bit of a hypocrite, because I think I wouldn't mind an A1, but there's no Sony version of it. And Profoto are taking forever to bring that out for some reason. I don't know why. If Godox brought one out, I may buy one of those in the time being, so that I can use it, because I did love the A1 when I used it. The round light does make a difference. It's much sort of softer when you look at the light. Instead of coming out of a flash head like this, it's softer because it spreads a little bit differently. It does make a difference. And I also love the way the diffuser clips on. I love the way the color gels work and things like that. So I may buy that to use if they release this before Profoto, but I'll still more than likely buy the A1 when it's released, and I'll put my money back into Profoto, because I do believe in what I'm saying, that I really should be supporting Profoto. But even if I didn't buy the A1, I've spent that much money through Profoto that I still have a clear conscience with my thinking. But I just wanted you to sort of think about that aspect of it when you start knocking this higher end of gear. Just think that it's probably good for everyone that it's there. But I might try that Godox if it's released. Because Sony particularly, Profoto for some reason just aren't releasing a Sony version of that light. There's only a Nikon and Canon version. What else have we got? Jason said Sony should put something crazy for the A7S III, like the 256 gigabyte internal storage, 1QXD slot, 4K 60p, 10-bit, 420. God, imagine if they do all this stuff. This would be crazy. Just let me check. Did I have another story? Yeah, I have. I've got one more. All right, I'm going to go back over and then we'll come back to questions. Let me go back to another story before we keep going on. So the last story of the day before we open this up to Q&A is this. And I wanted to talk about the size comparison between the A7 versus the Panasonic. And this was interesting when I looked at it. There's a bit of perspective difference here, but the camera itself, the Panasonic, is way bigger than what the Sony is, if you look at how they actually are. Now, a lot of people may like that because I know a lot of people complain that they don't like the Sony bodies. I love the Sony body, so it doesn't bother me at all. But if you did like a bigger feeling type camera, more SLR type camera that has a much bigger grip, well, obviously the Panasonic is going to be much better in that regard. You can see here how much bigger the grip actually is. You've also got the nice LCD screen if you need it. I don't know if you really need that, but anyway, it's there. I'd prefer some more controls to be up there if that was my design. But it is much, much bigger than what the Sony is. So if you do like a bigger SLR type camera, this may be a good camera for you. Like I said, we're still waiting on stacks of stuff to find out how it actually goes. But yeah, there you go. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to open it up to questions, and we can go on from there. So you can open up to anything. So anything you'd like to ask. Like I said, if you do want to have a question that I don't miss, you can put @DavidOsler or just the @DavidOsler that way. And it'll make sure I don't miss a question coming down here. So let's go to open Q&A and see how we go. Langston said, I don't bag people who can afford nice gear. I get like them, so I can afford the nice gear too. But it's amazing, Langston, how many people do. When I've put up stuff recently with the Profoto B10, the hate that I got on that video was just incredible. You know, the people saying you can buy 5 Godox for the prices of that flash, all this sort of other stuff. And I really felt like saying to people, why do you bag someone that buys the higher end of gear? If they can justify that purchase, surely that's just their decision. And look, I have to be honest, guys that follow me don't tend to be doing that, but these are questions obviously from people that are just seeing the video on YouTube and then they just start slamming stuff down. But I just wanted to clear up that, you know, you should sort of think more from that line of, yeah, I might not be able to afford it. Okay, that's no big deal. I'm going to afford whatever I can get, which may be Godox, which works fantastic. But remember, that has come down and been reverse engineered from something that has been developed by these companies spending all that money. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind when you're looking at high-end gear. Sony should be waiting for a new EVF. Well, that's coming out the end of the year, so we definitely know that was going to be an issue. And I mentioned that early in the new year, that was meant to be released around November. That 5.6 million dot EVF is coming out later in the year. That's why I always believed that the Sony a7S III was going to be released sort of around November, December, but now I'm not sure. My photography school had pro photos. They are by far the best. Wish I had the money. Robert said, I broke my Nikon SB900. Godox will replace it. Yeah, I used to use SB900s as well. Robert, I used to use 3 of those in my wedding business. They were great flashes. Chris said, Craig Adams makes a living using the Sony a7 III and the DJI Maverick Pro 2. The a7 III seems like the best option for someone who is not invested in Canon or Nikon. The a7 III is amazing. It's easily, I think, the best hybrid camera out there at the moment still. Wayne said, the XT3 handheld video is bad. It's hard to go with an XT3 when GH5, G9 and Sony has stabilization. I know it was a big letdown them not putting IBIS in that camera when they've basically got 4K 60p in there. Why wouldn't you put IBIS in it? I don't understand that either. It was a letdown, I have to admit. I handhold a lot now. I've got better and better at it. With practice, you can become very good. Rui said, always love new cameras, but my wife and I have the a7 III and love them. Not sure what I would take for us to want a new camera. I'm sure that one will come out. I'm sure it will. The Mavic 2 just came out. Yeah, I've got the Maverick Pro. I don't think I'll upgrade that for a while, I don't think. Langston said, and it's soft 4K. Is that the Fuji, Langston, you're talking about there? Robert said, David, you were only as good as your last purchase. No Godox for you, mate. Linda said, thank you, no worries, Linda. Mark said, in the middle of scratching logo off the offending Go box, scratch. Nothing wrong with that, Mark. Look, honestly, I'm not having a go at you guys for purchasing that. I just want you to have a think about what I said. Where were we? Kind of like cars, Langston said, exactly. Dave said, the A7R3 is only 10 months old and the A7 III is 5 months. I feel like you guys forget this. I know I do too, Dave. It seems like an eternity ago. It seems like eternity ago that I actually had the A9. You know, I feel like I've had this for forever. But, you know, the thing is, though, I still get such a kick every time I do a wedding or a shoot with them. I really do. I just love those two cameras that much. Langston said, you drive Hyundai until you can drive the whatever you like. I love the new bodies. I don't get why they get so much hate. Joe said, I bet the A1 knockoff will be missing the incredible Profoto OS. Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Whether it's going to have that on the front. The way the Profoto works is beautiful. And that's one thing I'm not sure if they'll change. If they only stick the bottom of one of their other flashes there, it's not going to be anywhere near when you use the Profoto one, because that is outstanding. The interface on that is amazing. It really is. Langston said, I've heard about all this nonsense with Adobe Lightroom beat into the Zeiss camera. Yeah, we discussed that before, Langston. I don't know how it's going to work. Linda said, yes, I have a lot of L glass. The good part is the L glass does work great, though, on the latest Sony cameras. Andrew said, I want 6K, 4K 60, 4K 120 XLR inputs. You don't have bit rates, you don't want much. Jay Harville said, I would get Profoto, but I'm a student right now, and I can understand that completely. Imagine wanting the power of a V12 diesel truck in the size of and price of a Corolla. Robert said, yep, you are right. I don't see Leica peeps talk about buying other stuff. It's just us slubs. Leica is a religion, isn't it? What is your guess on the A7000 release? Photokina, I think. October. I think it's Photokina, isn't it? I think that's the one that's next. I always get confused. There's so many of them. My guess is October. Seems to me that each of the full-frame mirrorless competitors has a fatal flaw, and that's the problem. They do. And I think they've done that deliberately to hold back a little bit. I just think that's what's happened. Canon R has 4K crop and no joystick. Berger said, oh, David, I finally got my A7 III. Boy, science fiction coming from the dyno. Obviously, it is. I know. Yeah, that's a massive jump coming up from the D60. The first Nikon I had was the D90. And that was the first first digital SLR that came out that had video. They even beat Canon. That's when I moved up to the D90 and I dropped film. What else have we got? Good point, David. Quibbilly, is it? Good point, David. We need people who can afford expensive gear like the B10 to support the camera gear evolution. It always flows down. I think people just forget that. Mick said Nikon and Panasonic have questionable autofocus, and that's the problem. And I don't know if... Well, Nikon... Well, I'm not sure. I think they've improved that with their latest camera, obviously. But Panasonic definitely haven't answered that yet. We have to wait and see how that's been answered. Carl said, so far Sony is the only manufacturer that can include all the features and make it work. Yes, apart from 4K 60p, really. Langston said, I think we just have to wait for processors that basically you can do 4K 60 everywhere, and that's true. Nick said, I agree, Carl. Oh, I think I just dropped my phone. Hang on. Langston said, where was it? No, I have the... Oh, you have the Maverick Pro 2. What's that saying there? No, the Maverick Pro is quite soft in 4K. Wow, that's interesting. So where did you hear that? I mean, have you actually got one, Langston? Well, that's really interesting because I never realised that was the case. He's saying there that, no, the Maverick Pro 2 is quite soft in 4K. I recently got one. Oh, and compared to my Phantom 4, it's horrible. Before people try and tell me it's not a Phantom, they advertised a 1-inch sensor. That's really interesting. Has anyone else got one of those that can let me know? Or is that just something that Langston has noticed in that? Dwayne said, what are your thoughts on the 35 1.4 Distagon? Bought the 24mm, but trying to round out my kit. 70 to 200 and 85 1.4. Well, like I said to you, I adore the 35 1.4. That is one of my favourite lenses. My two favourite lenses are the 35 1.4 and the Batis. And then I have to say that the Tamron is probably in there now also because it's basically by far exceeded everything that I would ever want in that type of a camera lens. So, but still, if you're dealing with me being able to shoot in low light, I love the 35mm focal length. Things like that. So having the 35 is probably still my favourite focal length. For portraits, the 85 Batis just tends to be my favourite focal length. I still have to try and get my hands on a 135 though. I'd like to try that, and whether that's the Sigma or whether it's something like the 105 Sigma, or even if Sony comes out with one. I think the Sony one's going to be incredibly expensive. I'm not sure, and we don't know what focal length that's going to be. I'd like to try that out as well. But your question there is the 35 1.4, which I would get. I love that lens. You've bought the 24. If you've got the 24, you may not need the 35 1.4. I'd probably get something else, but that might be the way that you shoot. You might be better if you haven't got a 55 or something like that to get that. But trying to round out my kit, 70 to 200 and an 85 1.4. Yeah, well, it looks like you have a really great kit there. What else have we got? The 24 seems to be great though. Initially I wasn't thinking that I'd get that, but I may down the line for on a gimbal. Langston said, and the Hasselblad name all over it. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Linda said, I couldn't afford the Profoto A1, bought Godox. Yeah, and I can understand that totally, Linda. Demetrius said, if only they would put a SIM card in the Zeiss. Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, okay, then you could just upload from that. That'll make it easier. Yep, true. Nick said, I also love the L-glass, but something that I'd never see talked about here on YouTube is video autofocusing using adapted lenses on Sony camera. I talk about that all the time, Nick. That for stills, the adapted lenses is fantastic. Canon lenses work brilliantly. Sigma adapted lenses work well. But the problem is if you're dealing with video autofocus, they hunt. And this is the problem. So if you're dealing with adapted lenses, they are fantastic if you're dealing with stills and you're not dealing with moving images in video. If you are, you have to go native. And that's the thing that I'll tell everyone, that you cannot beat the native lenses for video autofocus. The Tamron works brilliantly. So Tamron have done it, but then they've been given the mount, obviously all the details, and they've been able to work to that because Sony have given them permission. But you can't beat Sony lenses if you're dealing with the autofocus, and you also can't beat the Tamron if you're dealing with autofocus. An adaptive lens is never ever going to beat that. So that's something that you do have to consider if you're dealing with adapted lenses. They're never going to work as well if you're dealing with tracking in video and things like that. I talk about that all the time, Nick. Linda said, where are we? But I do not like the plastic hot shoe one. It broke after just a couple of months. Why can't they metal like Canon or Nikon? You're talking about on the flash, Linda? Mark said, Profoto and Godox, the fact is also that cheaper versions keep prices down, even though Profoto is expensive, but what would they charge without the competition? Well, I'm not sure it makes much difference with them, Mark, because their prices have always been sort of consistent, I've found. You may be right, though, if there was nothing else out there that they may charge more. Wayne said, my concern with the S1 and the S1R is video autofocus. Yes, and we're still waiting to see that. We haven't got any answers about that yet, about how Panasonic are going to go with that as well. The B10 looks awesome. Has to wait until after the 24 1.4 GM. Yeah, it is great. I love that B10 deal. I really do. Robert Daniel said, oh, Sony noticed IAF for animals, and the next step they are saying is AI. Yeah, I wanted to actually talk about that. I don't think I brought that up. I mentioned that previously, that in the last video live one I did, that Sony have said that they're going to give eye autofocus to animals. And that really is a good thing, because how many people do you see that actually photograph dogs and things like that? And to have eye autofocus on that is really going to make a difference. So I can't wait for that feature. They're also saying that they're going to have this AI learning, which is also going to make things work quicker as well. And if you look at how fast, say, the Sony A9 and the a7 III focus particularly, if they can up that focusing, I'm just thinking how good the focusing is going to be in the next versions of these cameras. I'm hoping that they bring out the firmware for this. I wouldn't count on it. I think they may force you to get another camera, but they're not Fuji. Sony aren't Fuji, like Fuji do add great features. But I do think that they're now talking about IAF on animals and this AI learning, which could be fantastic. And I can't wait to see what they bring in that regard. Wayne said, Sony is working on their global shutter. That's another thing that's going to come out eventually. They could be holding back on the a7S III because they want to implement it. Well, you never know, but I'm not sure that's the reason why. Demetrius said 24-70 and 70-200 my favourite lenses. Mark said, I will eventually get the B10 for its portability and video light. So just not a Godox fanboy. Yeah, that B10 is just incredible, because that light on it is a video light. That's what people have to understand. That is a true video light. There's no strobing with that light at all. Having that control over temperature and power and being able to do it by your mobile phone or whatever, it's just, I just adore it. Streets of Vancouver said, my original RX1R is still a fave of all-time camera. That's a great camera, Streets of Vancouver. Langston said, I'll post a link in the group to someone who did research. I thought I did something wrong until I investigated. Also, people join the group on Facebook. Yes, please join that photography and videography group, guys. Sony needs a 105 f1.4 GM. Yeah, I'm dying to try that f105 version. Langston said his favourite lens is a 70-400. 70-300, yep, okay. Nick said, I found the 16-35 is the best run and gun lens for me. I've got the 16-35 f4. I don't use it much, though, only if I'm dealing with wide. Linda said, yes, flash. Okay, yeah. 16-35, 2.8 Canon I've got is great, but I can't rely on it due to no video AF. Yeah. Langston said, don't need to read that. So I'm going to get the 16-35 f4, but worried about performance wide open. Well, I haven't had a problem, Nick, with it. I just raise the ISO. If I need, I'm just trying to think if it's not really an issue with the latest, say the a7 III and the a7 IX or the a7R III, because you can really start to push the ISO up. Look, if you can afford the G Master, that obviously is going to be a better lens, but it's way more expensive and it's way heavier. So you have to justify what you'd want to do. The other option too is if you ever need to go wide than that, you could buy a cheaper wide angle that is a 2.8 wide angle. But I love the 16-35 f4. Full frame cell phone. My favourite lens is the Sony 90 macro. Yep, that's incredibly sharp. Dimitri said, I really hope the IAF for animals is a firmware update. So do I. I wouldn't count on it, though. Linda said, talking about the bottom hot shoe on the Godox 860 is plastic for Sony. The flash is heavy and the hot shoe broke for me. Cheap plastic. Yeah, that's not good, is it? Erica said, might buy the upcoming 40mm Sigma lens as it also doubles as a weights for my workout routine. DL said, now that you've used the B10 in a few shoots, do you miss the extra? No, I haven't. I haven't missed the B1Xs at all. In fact, I'm almost tempted to sell them. Or I've got 3 of them. I'm almost tempted to sell one and then buy another B10. I'm just thinking about it. But I haven't missed the power, to be honest. But I may later on, and that's the thing. Like, I'm doing a shoot with Kiara next week. I think it's going to be a sunset shoot in the canola. And that's where the B1s may have an advantage because they've got the 500 watts. And if I'm going to overpower the sun in the sunset, I might need it. So I wouldn't sell them completely, but I haven't missed them at this stage. Since I've had the Profoto B10, I haven't used the B1s at all. In fact, the only light that I took to the last wedding I did was the B10, and it fitted in my case. It's amazing. It fits in there like a lens. Demetra said, I thought the IAF had already worked on animals. No, it doesn't. Photo Store Media says, I don't think we can have a global shutter full frame sensors with ASO low light. Not anytime soon. Yeah, I wouldn't expect that to be coming out anytime soon either. Mark said, Canon lenses on Sony. I own the 85 1.2 and the 70-200 Canons, and they adapt very well with the MC11. Maybe there is some other algorithm going on in the A7Rs that, in comparison to the A7 III, not sure. Yeah, and that's why I'm so interested, Mark, in the Canon 85 1.2. I love what that lens gives for portraits, and it's always interests me. And I still may get that down the line with the MC11. Mark said, yeah, great glass. I have the A7 III, but I bet they don't autofocus in video. So is there any last questions, guys, before I call it a day? I've got a wedding tomorrow to do, which I'm really looking forward to doing. Again, so I'll post probably that dance video tomorrow morning for you, so you can have a look at that one. Really looking forward to posting that. I'm working on that now. So you'll see how that goes. And that was shot with the A7 III and the Sony 55mm and the Tamron 28-75 and a gimbal on the Moser Aircross. So, you know, stay tuned for that one. Wayne said, what do you think Sony will announce next month? I think it's going to be the A7000, Wayne. That's what my guessing is. Demetrius said, what do you do your editing on? Do you mean what computer, Demetrius, or what software? If it's software, I use Lightroom and then Photoshop, the Creative Suite. If it's hardware, I use the Mac Pro, the round cone trashy boothy thing, whatever you call it, like the rubbish binny type one. That's the high spec one. I use that. Thanks for a great show, Mike saying. Casper said, great show, thumbs up. Thank you so much, Casper. All right, guys, we'll call it a day. And I'll see you all after the wedding. I might pop on or something, have a discussion with you, or post a video on Sunday. Apart from that, I've got a wedding tomorrow, so I won't be online tomorrow. Oh, yeah, computer is the trash can Mac Pro. That's what I'm using. Yep, the black one that's in the trash can. All right, guys. Catch you all for the next show. And it's good day from down under. Bye, everyone.